How would it be if you married a non-Malaysian, raised a family overseas, only to come home and realize that your child cannot get the same citizenship as yourself? And how would it be if you are a foreign spouse here in Malaysia, unable to work because of Malaysia's archaic immigration policies?
There were times when I remember when my daughter was like a few months old, I was getting a 15-day special pass. I'm thinking, here am I with an infant, I'm breastfeeding her, and I'm given a 15-day pass. Does it need to be like this?
The process is pretty clear. The process for application for citizenship is pretty clear. What is not clear is the basis for rejection. What is not clear is how the Home Minister exercises his discretion. So when your application is rejected, there is no way of telling why it was rejected.
Welcome to Audio Stories, a two-booknet stalking special edition show in collaboration with Empower Malaysia. We bring you voices of marginalized communities in Malaysia by questioning how would it be to walk in their shoes. In this episode, you will be listening to a foreign spouse experience. And don't miss the other episodes featuring Orang Asli, refugees, and transgender voices.
But first, a story. How would it be if you and your child are forced to live in different countries because of Malaysia's citizenship laws? What does it do to binational families when immigration red tape and discriminatory citizenship laws against women adds more stress to a marriage? We explore these themes in the following prose narrative.
The Senseless Persecution of Love Beyond Borders. Written by Diana Young and read by Nadia. It's 1:15 a.m. The house is still and quiet. I try to sleep, but my mind refuses to rest. I sit up in bed, I check the clock. It's past 8 p.m. in New Zealand. It's a good time to call. The phone rings thrice, and I see her face. Ma, can't sleep again? Lena is still in her office, working late again. My daughter runs her fingers through her hair. I can see the dark circles under her eyes. She smiles, but it's strained. We chat as we often do about our days. Hers long, tiresome, and stressful. Mine filled with the mundane and the routine. I tell her of Auntie Lau's bad knees, my physiotherapist Doreen's fender bender, and the big fuss when the neighbor's cat went missing yesterday. We laugh a little, but it's tinged with sadness. It's been a long time since I've been in the same room as my child, and seeing her face makes me yearn for her presence all the more. It'll be 1 year next month. My daughter speaks the words I can't bear to speak out loud. 1 year next month since her father's death. She doesn't need to say. I still can't get that visa to come visit. Her eyes turn red from the tears she tries to hold back. My daughter isn't Malaysian, and so she can't get a visa to visit me during the pandemic. The only thing we could do was console each other until I ended the call, urging Lena to go home for the night. I put down my phone, lay back on my pillow, and pick up a nearby photo of my late husband, John. John, with his kind eyes and shy smile, who swept me off my feet all those years ago, the thoughtful man who sat next to a nervous foreign student, who was far from home and overwhelmed by it all, who became first a classmate, then a friend, and finally my everything. The man for whom I stayed in Auckland to build a home with. 2 months after we graduated, we were married. A year after that, we were blessed with Lena. When Lena was barely a year old, my father had a stroke. We returned to Malaysia to care for him, to console my mother, and help raise my teenage brother. John came to love Malaysia, and eventually we decided we'd stay. We resolved to take over my father's small business. Everything was going well. Well, almost everything. Malaysia, it seems, has no need of those who would wish to become Malaysians. There's little provision for those who wish to be adopted by its beautiful shores, lush jungles, and rich culture. We chose to stay here and raise a family, but if ever there was a way to test the structural integrity of a marriage, few could have topped the bureaucracy at the Malaysian Department of Immigration. Once our decision to stay was made, we visited the Department of Immigration to begin permanent residency procedures. Little did we know of the nightmarish hurdles ahead of us. The first year, John is asked to return to New Zealand while his application is being processed. We are told it will take 2 months, so we console ourselves it will be a short separation. Unhappily, we comply. But the 2 months come and go with no news. And the months gradually build up while my young daughter wanders the house perplexed, searching in the nooks and crannies of our tiny apartment for her missing father. I spent many tearful nights in that horrible year, yearning for my husband, single parenting a young child, adjusting to the responsibility of shouldering a business. Almost 6 months of weekly checks with the immigration department later, John is finally allowed to join us. The hesitancy with which our young daughter approached the strange man at the airport almost broke both our hearts. Then, we were told that John's stay was conditioned on his employment at a multinational company. Tense weeks passed as we frantically searched for a suitable job. He was forced to widen his job search beyond my hometown of Malacca, as jobs were scarcer in the historical city. It was nothing more than a pure stroke of luck that we managed to find him a suitable job at a company in KL. I often look back and marvel at how our marriage survived those years. John's weekly commutes to and from Malacca lasted for 5 years. The times we were forced to drop everything and scramble for every little concession at the immigration office. 5 long years in which we were more often apart than together. Years in which we each had to maintain our own households. 5 years of raising a child who was bewildered each time her father woke early on Monday mornings to go far, far away for the week. 5 years in which I could feel my husband physically pulling away from me as he lived a life he hated. All to be in this country for my sake. Can you make a family when you spend less than a day a week together? When your burdens are not halved by sharing but doubled by distance? When absence make your heart grow not fonder but more resentful and emotionally fragile? Can you be someone's loving wife and justify subjecting them to the slow, agonizing torture of endless governmental red tape? Even my parents could see how the strain was tearing us apart. Eventually, my brother was grown enough to take over my father's business, and my daughter and I moved to the capital to be with John, to begin anew the process of becoming a family. But while John eventually earned his red IC after 12 years of being in Malaysia, for my daughter, it was a different story. Even with a Malaysian born and bred mother, Lena never got her Malaysian citizenship. For years, we would have to fly overseas to renew her social visa. Later, she would have a student visa, but still the headaches persisted. Again and again, we would fill up all the forms to submit a request for citizenship, but always the status would come back stamped with bold letters, rejected. We were never told the reasons why. You see, the overseas-born child of a Malaysian mother does not get automatic citizenship. Only men could claim citizenship for a child from distant shores. For Lena, it was rejection after rejection, one blow after another, until we had no choice but to send her to a place that would never tell her she was not welcome to stay. Despite living here since toddlerhood, raised breathing Malaysian air, immersed in Malaysian culture, with the only family she ever knew all in Malaysia, she was still never allowed to truly call Malaysia home. She was destined to be punished for her foreign birth for all time. Such thoughts careen haphazardly inside my mind, the soundtrack of many insomniac nights, until finally I succumb to the oblivion of a restless sleep. The next day, I wake at 8 like clockwork. I've long retired and no longer work, but my body still retains the habit of years. I step outside for my daily morning walk, my 2 masks in place. I stay well away from other morning joggers. The pandemic is far from over, and my days of taking my health for granted are done. I make a carefully distanced purchase of a dozen eggs and a loaf of bread at the corner mini market, then retreat to the safety of my own 4 walls to make my breakfast. My phone buzzes. It's my cousin, Yiling. As usual, she wants to talk of a troubled relationship with her daughter-in-law. Like John, Shu Rei has married into a Malaysian family. She's a sweet young girl, a Taiwanese, someone who, like me, had her heart captured by a fellow student. They wouldn't listen when I warned them of the trials that lay ahead for the would-be immigrant. They figured love would conquer all. Now, Shure has lived in Malaysia for 2 years. She works on her English, hoping for that employer who would take a chance and sponsor her work visa. Until she finds a career, the young couple can ill afford to move out of their parents' home on a single person's salary. They are saving for a deposit on their own home, and so have few funds to spare for her to live it up as she pleases. So she chafes at the restrictiveness of living with her in-laws and cannot abide the smallness of her new life. This causes a great deal of stress for everyone in the family. With the pandemic, the stress levels are ever higher. Shu Rei has a looming visa renewal, and they have pinned high hopes that this time she will finally have restrictions lifted. The young couple have heard that things may go easier with their application if the couple is with child. Yi Ling is worried they may rush into having a child for the wrong reasons when they are at such an unsettled time in their marriage. Their nightly fights and arguments are surely not going to lessen with the added burden of a baby in their lives. Many people think a baby will provide the glue for a poor marriage, but how often does an unhappy parenthood destroy the marriage itself? I have words of sympathy for my cousin, but little in the way of consolation. The truth is, things have barely improved since the days when John and I, so optimistic and carefree, imagined we could build the perfect life in Malaysia. I think of how I am separated from my child, unable to be there for her in hard times or for her to give me comfort when I need it. I can't imagine what benefit the country derives from its draconian immigration policies. Too often, families give up and move elsewhere for good, or just give up being a family. Added to the long list of victims of petty bureaucracy and an unyielding adherence to narrowly interpreted policy. I turn on the TV to watch the news, to take my mind off these worries for a while. The headlines are filled with news of the awe-inspiring athletes congregating in Tokyo for the Olympic Games. There's a segment on Naomi Osaka, the tennis superstar who lit the Olympic torch to signal the start of the Games. Osaka, the child of a Japanese mother and Haitian father who moved to the USA at the age of 3. At 22, she chose to take the Japanese passport as a way of being closer to her Japanese roots. As I watch the coverage of the Games, I see again and again athletes who are clearly immigrants or children of immigrants. The ping pong players from China who have found new countries to represent. Zhang Ninali, the Canadian-born track and field athlete who competed for China to honor her maternal grandparents' sporting history. Joseph Schooling, the young son of a Chinese Malaysian and a Singaporean of British descent, who won Singapore's first ever gold medal at the 2016 Rio Olympics. All of them welcomed by their adopted nations and recognized as one of their own. I wonder how many persons of true potential have returned away from our shores. I wonder how many we have denied the opportunity to be a true part of our communities. People who have wanted to be productive members of our society, but were never given the room to give their best to us. I think of John and all our endless visits to the immigration department, and all the times we wondered if our marriage could take the burden put upon it by our immigration woes. I think of Lena and how we, mother and child, have fought and lost the lifelong battle to belong to the same nation. I think of Shure and the tough challenges she still faces ahead, and how all the Malaysian citizens around her are affected by her fate. The world today is one of fluid boundaries and increasingly transnational families. How long until we understand that the policies of the past must change in the wake of a new world? How many more must be affected before we choose a path of acceptance and open-heartedness? Will we be able to adapt in time to do right by our citizens? To heal our broken families? To no longer accept the senseless persecution of love beyond borders?
So Diana, you know that before I did this project, I really did not know that children born overseas of a Malaysian mom did not automatically get citizenship. That's insane, right? In this day and age that our constitution is so gender biased.
And I think maybe it could have been interpreted a little bit differently, but just people just weren't interested in doing anything about it. They just didn't care enough. And I think that's the part that hurts the most.
As you would realize as we talk in the interview, is quite an interesting project because while we were doing this, there was also a court case going on. And you will find out a little bit more about it in the conversation that we have with the ladies from Family Frontiers. So we talked to Bina and Melanie Ann of Family Frontiers, a bi-national advocacy NGO fighting for the rights of foreign spouses of Malaysian citizens and their children.
Why don't you start, Bina? If you're able, just give us a little bit of background about yourself and your experiences of being a foreign spouse yourself.
So before I got married when I was single, I had a good career myself. I used to work for the hospitality industry. When my husband said we should get married, and I told him, can you find out about in Malaysia, how is it going to be? How long will it take for me to get PR, and I want to know if I can work immediately. And he said, oh, there's no problem. Within 5 years, you will get PR and there shouldn't be a problem for you to work. So I really don't know who gave him that information, but he went to immigration and got that information from immigration. And this is close to 3 decades ago. That's how long I have been in Malaysia. Well, it didn't happen like that. It was a struggle because I was always treated as a foreigner. It was hard to get jobs. I mean, I had given up a really good career and I had to start back from scratch. I had to go back to learn driving. I had to learn a new language. It wasn't an easy call with no support systems. And in those days, we had no internet. And I had a 3-minute call with my family once a month because phone calls were very expensive. It was a lonely road. Getting adapted to a new situation. Yeah, the kids came along and I didn't expect that it's going to be so difficult even for simple things like when my daughter was sick, to admit her in hospital, she was refused because I was a foreigner. She was having an asthmatic attack and I just carried her, she was 7 months, to rush to the hospital. And they said, where's her birth cert? Who takes a birth cert in an emergency? And so I had my passport, of course. And they said, oh, but you're a foreigner, so your child could be a foreigner. Luckily for me, at that time, my husband was in KL, so he could come immediately and we could get her attended. Okay. And I thought, no mother, whether you're a foreigner or a local, should go through this, that in a time of an emergency, you're not given that assistance.
And folks, that is just the tip of the iceberg. We're not even going yet into the immigration side of things. We have heard stories of people being shuffled around from one department to another, people spending days in immigration trying to get renewals. And the irony is that expatriates do not have this problem. So people who come to Malaysia who work can get their spouses on a dependent pass quite easily. They even can bring their parents over, while foreign spouses bereft of their own support systems often have to go through it alone and get shuffled around, as we were saying.
It was like burdensome, difficult, challenging. And bear in mind, we don't have our support systems here. Like I didn't have parents. I could even just take my kids and drop them there and go for a date night with my husband. There were times when I remember when my daughter was like a few months old, I was getting a 15-day special pass. I'm thinking, here am I with an infant, I'm breastfeeding her, and I'm given a 15-day pass. Does it need to be like this? I mean, we are educated women, we know our rights, and do we have to go through this, right? For what?
Yeah, and because of this, Bina decided that she needed to find that support system. And, because she thought there must be other women and mothers in the same position as her. And that is how she started the Foreign Spouses Support Group on Facebook. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Issues like this never really come to mind unless it starts affecting your lives and your loved ones. And, how would it be if you're in not a position of privilege or you do not have a supportive spouse? What happens if you have a divorce while you're going through all these immigration problems and you find yourself stuck in a country that doesn't have laws to protect you?
I never really expected that through all of this, that I will actually be guiding thousands of women in the same situation that I was. And when I started back in 2007, and I called for my first meeting, nobody landed up because people were so scared that, is this like a protest? It wasn't. It was just meant to be a discussion amongst mothers. Well, the next time we organized the meeting, we had about 10 of them who came in, and it was shocking that they had same difficulties, inability to work. Some of them had PhDs and not working. There were people who had the same difficulties as us, admitting children to hospital, getting admission in school. And from there, we were helped by various migrant groups. And I started taking on some capacity building trainings to train how to write a report. Because earlier to this, I had only written down my story And wherever I went, I would actually read it. I had to get a letter of permission for my husband to work. Oh my gosh, at least my marriage is working, and at least my husband encouraged me to work. What about those women whose marriage is in trouble? What are they going to do? Okay, and I can tell you, I'm sitting in a position of privilege. There are many women who are torn away from their children because they don't have full custody of their children. And no one wants to take full custody because you want the other parent to co-parent. So if you're a foreign mother and you have, even in some cases, there were mothers who had joint custody and who have been refused to live in the country. And the kids are very young. We had cases also reported where the mother and child were sent back to their home country. There's no maintenance given. There's no divorce, nothing. Her life, she can't even go on with her life. There are situations where the mother does not want to leave the child. And so she stays in a toxic marriage. And these are the different things, levels where there's no protection for the women at all, a foreign woman.
Even in stable families, the inability to get legally employed puts pressure when only one member of the couple can work. And, imagine if you're married to somebody who is skilled and highly educated, and yet they could not work in the country that you choose to live in. And you find, and I find that the more we looked into this issue, we realized that it affects so many people that you don't expect this issue to affect.
As a foreign spouse, you need to go through a lot of bureaucratic processes to get to the employment stage. And so there are many women who don't get employed. There are also many men who have difficulties getting employed. So which means the Malaysian woman is put into a challenging situation. She's disproportionately impacted because if her husband doesn't work, then she bears the burden of bringing in the income and supporting the family. A foreign woman may not have autonomy over her finances, she does not have economic autonomy. A Malaysian woman has to bear the brunt of providing the income for the entire family. Right? Although immigration says, oh yeah, you can work, you can get an endorsement to work. It's not that easy because employers, when they see prohibited from all forms of employment, will be reluctant to take on a foreign spouse for employment.
And of course, the other main issue is citizenship. Mel, who works for Family Frontiers, is able to shed some light on this. And as a matter of fact, we recorded this episode over the course of a landmark achievement in their fight for equal citizenship rights. Listen on for what was the situation faced by Malaysian mothers married to foreign spouses and what happened after.
Essentially, there exist three areas where there's biases available in current citizenship provisions. So the main one that we're currently focusing all of our resources on is the issue of the unequal rights of Malaysian women to pass on their citizenship to their overseas-born children. So these are Malaysian women who are married to foreign spouses. And when these Malaysian women give birth overseas, their children cannot secure citizenship by operation of law on an automatic basis, whereas Malaysian men who marry foreign women, their children born overseas can obtain Malaysian citizenship automatically by operation of law. And this is enshrined in Article 14 of the Federal Constitution that stipulates who gets to get a Malaysian citizenship by operation of law. So what then Malaysian women have to rely on is Article 15.2 of the Federal Constitution, which is citizenship by registration. Now, this is a very arbitrary process that is filled with, delays, repeated rejections that come with no reasons, and eventually no guarantee of securing citizenship. There's also the aspect of children born out of a legally recognized marriage to Malaysian fathers and foreign women. And a lot of the times, this is the issue that contributes to the issue of statelessness, because when these children can't either trace back to their biological mother or cannot access the citizenship of the foreign mother, they are either at risk of statelessness or a huge population of them are rendered stateless. And this is a huge issue that we see in East Malaysia, in Sabah and Sarawak, where there's a lot of population of stateless persons. And the other issue is the rights of Malaysian women to pass on their citizenship to their foreign spouses on an equal basis as Malaysian men.
Can you tell us about the lawsuit that you're bringing against the Malaysian government on behalf of some Malaysian mothers? And can you tell us what the lawsuit seeks to achieve?
So we filed the case last year in December with 6 other mothers who were affected by Malaysian citizenship laws. And essentially what the case seeks is a declaration or an interpretation of the federal constitution, of Article 14 of the federal constitution, to be read harmoniously with Article 8 of the federal constitution. So if you look at the federal constitution, Article 8 is the section that guarantees fundamental liberties to everyone in the country. And Article 8(2) specifically was amended in 2001 to include gender as a prohibited grounds for discrimination. So that was seen as a very huge win for the women's movement in Malaysia because you were recognizing gender as a prohibited grounds for discrimination. So no one can discriminate you on the basis of your gender in the country. However, what didn't follow after that amendment was a review of all other laws that may contradict that or may not uphold that amendment. So what our suit is seeking is for Article 14 to be read harmoniously with Article 8 of the federal constitution, so that it's interpreted in a way that women are also given equal citizenship, so that gender equality is upheld. So that case is currently in progress. Of course, we received pushbacks because the government attempted to strike out the case. So where we're at now is that High Court actually dismissed that strike out application and ruled for the case to move forward. The government then filed an appeal against this High Court decision, saying that we're not satisfied, we still want to go ahead with the strikeout. So the Court of Appeals heard the case and dismissed the government's appeal and said that the case can go forward. So we're now back at the KL High Court, where the merits of our case would be heard at the KL High Court. So for us, that's a huge win. Huge win in the sense that Malaysian women are given that avenue to air their challenges, to air their struggles, because we've had these laws for over 60 years, ever since Malaysia came into being. And obviously it was drafted during colonial periods, and the reality back then doesn't reflect the reality of Malaysian women today. So it was really celebrated in our group of mothers that we have, all mothers who are actually seeking citizenship for their children. They're all very hopeful that this would result into something, into finally justice for all these mothers.
So it's not even asking for a change of legislature, it's actually the interpretation, right? The interpretation of the rules to actually be, okay, I understand.
The good news is we actually have an update on the situation. And on the 9th of September 2021, the KL High Court ruled that Malaysian mothers have the right to confer citizenship on their children on an equal basis of Malaysian men. So High Court Judge Akhtar Tahir ruled that the word father must therefore be read to include mothers and that their children are entitled to citizenship by operation of law. Justice Akhtar said the courts are empowered to interpret the law to uphold the spirit of the federal constitution and ensure justice. He said that the case does not seek to change policy, but rather to apply existing law in a way that will find a remedy for the grievance of the plaintiffs. So he says that the grievances of the plaintiffs are real and the discrimination is apparent.
And bear in mind that the Home Ministry did numerous attempts to frustrate and block the ruling every step of the way. So this was an immense victory for Malaysian women, especially those who have spent years fighting this prejudice. And did you know that previous to this, Malaysia is one of 25 countries in the world that denies women the right to confer nationality to their children on an equal basis as men? And Malaysia is also one of 50 countries in the world that denies women the equal right to confer nationality on their spouses.
We caught up with Shamila, who is a Malaysian woman living in Kenya, on her own experiences after this ruling.
I'm Shamila Unnikrishnan and I'm in Nairobi, Kenya. I've lived here for the last 12 years now with my husband and 2 children. Well, both my children were born in Nairobi. I was naively under the impression that when they're born, I'll go to the High Commission and register them as Malaysians. And so when our daughter was born, she was born in November of 2011, and we go home to Malaysia every year, if not more than a couple of times a year. And so because we were due to travel to Kuala Lumpur in August of 2011, I went to the High Commission sometime in May or June to submit this, what I thought was a registration form, to register her. And I thought, okay, we'll have her passport, and her maiden trip home will be on a Malaysian passport. That was not possible. And so what happened was, the Malaysian High Commission here, this was to be their first application for citizenship under 15.2. And because it was their very first, they were very careful to dot all the I's and cross all the T's and make sure we had everything in order. And they supported me with numerous follow-ups to JPN and KDN and where's this application, what's happening. So my question then became, all right, now our travel time is close. Should I go and get her a Kenyan passport? Because otherwise we won't be allowed to travel. And they said, yep. And I said, will that jeopardize her application for citizenship? I was told no, because children are allowed to be dual citizens until they're 21, at which point they must choose. It's fair enough. And so we went home, and we've been going back, regularly. A couple of ministers visited Kenya for different meetings, and they were all quite surprised that this was taking so long. So one of them, Ramanand, actually, at the time our Minister for Local Government, got his special officer to draft up a letter of support on behalf of the Malaysian mothers living in Kenya whose children's applications were pending. It was only in response to that letter that I found out that my first application was in fact rejected. I didn't know before this because nothing had been communicated to me. And I'd made a couple of phone calls to KDN, and I was told, ini perkara kewarganegaraan, perkara perlembagaan, tidak boleh dirayu. It is at the discretion of the minister. On our next trip to Kuala Lumpur, I filed Isla's second application, this time in person and at JPN. And I was told not to expect a response before the 2-year mark. And sure enough, at the 2-year mark, I got a letter of rejection. We haven't been able to file our third application because we haven't been able to travel home. We haven't been able to travel home because of the travel restrictions globally. So when our son was born in 2019, I went through the same process, and he's been registered here. The application has been lodged with the High Commission here in Nairobi, just like we did for Isla, and that's still pending.
Are you at all aware of the proper process? Is there a proper process that is communicated to citizens about how they can actually get this done?
The process is pretty clear. The process for application for citizenship is pretty clear. You need to have been married, legally married, and then there is a whole checklist of documents that needs to be submitted to prove your own citizenship, and documents pertaining to your spouse as to where he's from, etc. And those are submitted. What is not clear is the basis for rejection. What is not clear is how the Home Minister exercises his discretion. So when your application is rejected, there is no way of telling why it was rejected. In other words, you'll submit the second application and possibly your fifth application in much the same way as you submitted the first, and cross your fingers, because there's no way of knowing why or how.
So I think, like before the judgment came out last week, you would have foreseen more difficulties for yourself in the future, traveling back to Malaysia, or, even maybe permanently coming back to Malaysia if you had so chosen to do. But now that we have this new judgment out, how do you feel about this?
The High Court has given voice to what is essentially a no-brainer, as far as I'm concerned. A Malaysian is a Malaysian is a Malaysian, right? Whether you're born to a Malaysian father or a Malaysian mother, whether that parent is married to a Malaysian, and no matter where you're born, you are a Malaysian by virtue of having one Malaysian parent. We're having this discussion because I'm a Malaysian woman. No one's ever asked a Malaysian man to think about who he or she will marry or where he'll have his child. And now no Malaysian woman will have to think about that either. I'm hugely hopeful. I'm hugely hopeful that the process that's been in place in respect to Malaysian fathers will now be applied to Malaysian mothers across the board. The essence of the judgment is that I should no longer have to apply. I should be able to register my children, as opposed to asking, please, can I be a citizen? I will now simply be taking them both to the High Commission or to JPN and having their births registered as Malaysians. Yeah, let's take this forward. I'm hugely hopeful that we've gotten this far, and that shows quite a progressive reading. Should we be having these discussions in 2021? No, but are we? Yes. And are we having those discussions correctly? Yes. And that's how societies evolve, and that's how the rights movement evolves. So this is just one facet of that. Doesn't matter whether you're ibu kandung or bapa kandung. As long as one parent is warga negara Malaysia, then the child is warga negara Malaysia. It's simple.
Just to finish it up, Bina, just maybe tell people a little bit more about where they can get more information and how they can get in touch with your society.
So annually, immigration renews about 170,000 long-term social visit passes. So that's about 170,000 bi-national families who are here in Malaysia. This does not include those spouses who are working overseas. They also face a lot of challenges in terms of COVID. They had difficulties even coming in. Many of them were stranded. So by right to prioritize families. Now, what people can do if they have difficulties is to reach out to Foreign Spouse Support Group. We have an FB page. We also have an FB page with Family Frontiers. So those mothers who are seeking citizenship for their children can connect with us. We can provide them with guidance, and we would be having a website and where they can actually get all the information as well. If they send in messages to the inbox, or they can connect with other families as well. There are about 21,000 people on our spouses who are in bi-national families on our FB page.
The main thing would obviously be signal boosting our content, because for us we wish for our issue as well as our awareness post to reach beyond the population that we usually reach out to. So signal boosting our posts would really be helpful. Sharing the news of our case, for instance, sharing the stories of mothers that we share on our pages would really help the cause. Secondly, I guess have more conversations on citizenship. It can start as small as having conversations at home, because the population of Malaysians in binational marriages is increasing year by year because of how globalized our world is. You'd be surprised to know which family member of yours, for instance, is impacted. Because when we have webinars and, or live talks, a lot of people are surprised because they'd be like, oh, you know what? This reminds me of my friend who's impacted. She hasn't been able to get citizenship as well. So have these conversations at home, make more people aware of the constitutional provisions in place. A lot of Malaysian women aren't aware of this provision, and sometimes they are mistold by authorities. If you're in an organization or in a community, collaborate with us so that we can host our events or speak with you, or even, have a joint event where we can reach more populations. And the other things could be if you're a youth and you have the energy and resources to actually contribute, then you can also volunteer with us. If you're someone who's financially able, you can reach out to us if you wish to donate to our cause. So these are some of the ways that I guess people who are listening can contribute to the movement for equal citizenship.
I think at the end of the day, we just want, the reason why we're doing this show as well, as you were saying, you want to reach out to other people that are not necessarily in the circle of people in the know, right? So hopefully this will reach out. Further readings. We haven't asked you for further readings. Is there anything that people can read? Because we are a book podcast. Is there any books or even articles that perhaps we can give links to?
We're setting up our new website soon, so we would, of course, link resources there. But our global partners in the global movement that we work with, so there's one called the Global Campaign for Equal Nationality Rights. There's also the Institute of Statelessness and Inclusion. They do publish a lot of resources, including children's books on the issue of gender discriminatory nationality laws as well as statelessness.
Yeah, so thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, everybody, ladies, for listening to our stories. And
Audio Stories is made possible by Empower Malaysia with funding from the United Nations Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. Special thanks to Bina, Melanie, and Shamila for being so candid with us.
And as a final word, we urge you to take interest in the hidden communities that are around you. Engage with them. Simple acts of activism can begin by just asking them, tell me your story. Be curious, and most of all, be kind, because all of us can use a little kindness in this world. As Melanie said in our conversation, you can amplify the voices of these ladies by sharing posts by Family Frontier, or if you know of bi-national families facing problems, you can also reach out to them by offering your friendship and a compassionate ear. And let's all rejoice for their victory in court. All change begins with a small step in the right direction.
You can check out Foreign Spouses Support Group Malaysia and Family Frontiers on Facebook for resources, information on the work that they do, as well as videos and stories. This has been Audio Stories, a Two Book Nerds Talking special editions show. We are produced by Renegade Radio and supported by Alyssa Pong and Stephanie Ong. The Senseless Prosecution of Love Beyond Borders was read by Nadia and written by Diana Young. And as usual, we are your friendly neighborhood book nerds, Honey and Diana.
For more details on the work that Empower Malaysia do, you can follow them on Instagram @MyEmpower, Twitter @Empower Malaysia, or go to their website at empowermalaysia.org. To read the prose narrative in a written form, you can also check it out at feminist.my.
We leave you with a quote from the Association of Family Support and Welfare Selangor's newsletter after the court ruling. Malaysian mothers have faced family separation, along with obstacles to accessing residency, education, healthcare, and social services for their children. Today's ruling is a monumental step in the direction of gender equality. #Saya Juga Anak Malaysia.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and read well.